The last issue I want to talk about is the management of veterinary practices. And if you'll remember when we talked about the recession and the recession's impact on veterinary medicine, we talked about better business practices as being the solution to many of those problems. And yet it's interesting to really look at how well veterinary practices are managed. You may remember this slide from one of the previous modules. In 2003, the respondents to the AVMA Pfizer Business Practices Study were asked, what actions are you going to take to improve profitability in the next year? And 95% of those practice owners said that they were going to raise fees. If you looked at any of the other business strategies that you could engage in order to improve profitability, less than 50% of respondents were planning on taking those actions. So whether it was managing inventories, reducing expenses, increasing staff training, expanding staff, using a practice management consultant, any of these other things that you could do that might help you run your business better, very few people were doing that. Instead, we were raising fees. Another interesting finding from the AVMA Pfizer Business Practices Study had to do directly with the use of common business practices. There was a list of 19 key business practices that all well-run businesses should use, included in this study. And practices were asked, how many of these business activities do you engage in? And what we found is that the number of practices engaging in good quality business activities actually dropped from a study done in 1997 to the repeat of these questions in this study done in 2003. So we were making more money during this time period. We were raising our fees, revenue was going up, but we weren't running our businesses any better than we had been 7 years previously. Another piece of evidence about how veterinary practices are doing comes from the NCVI Vet Partners Profitability Estimator. This tool is available on the NCVI website, and you can enter a little bit of data about your practice and it will calculate what your true profit margin is. The profit margin is the most important piece of information that a practice needs to know to determine if it's financially successful, but unfortunately this information is not readily available in the reports you get from your accountant. That's why you need to go to this profitability estimator and calculate what yours is. The average profit margin from the users who have entered their data into the NCVI website is 9.86%. The median profit margin is a little bit over 10%. The median and the average are pretty close here, and that's good because that means that these numbers or the average numbers aren't being distorted by either very high practices or very low practices. When you look at the breakdown of the users of the profitability estimator, so what were the profit margins making up that average of 9.86%, you see that a large number of practice owners don't have a very good profit margin. About 63% have what would be classified as either a poor or a fair profit margin. About 12% are in that good range, and only about 25% have actually excellent or superior profit margins. Profit margin is important because of two reasons. It's the profits that drives the value of the practice when it's sold, and also, all other things being equal, a higher profit margin means more cash flow. So you've got more cash to take home, to reinvest in the practice, to hire more people, to buy more equipment, whatever it is. But the profit margin is a very critical indicator of how well practices are being run. And what we're really seeing here is most practices don't have a very high level of profitability. Another very interesting question related to this has to do with the number of staff compared to the number of veterinarians. One of the trends that we're seeing in veterinary medicine is a big increase in the number of full-time equivalent staff to full-time equivalent veterinarians. So that number was 3.25 in 2003, and it increased to 4.25 in 2007, 31% increase. So what that means is that for each veterinarian in your practice, in this 4-year period, you hired one additional person. The common wisdom is that more people means you can see more clients, and so you can leverage those staff people, increase your revenue, increase your profitability. But that isn't always happening. There are many practices who have hired additional people, but they haven't increased their revenue correspondingly. So what you've done is increase your expenses, and you've probably got an easier work environment. People like working there more because they don't have to work as hard, but those increased staff people are not helping bring in more revenue. And that is particularly true during the recession when demand has been an issue. Another area we have to look at when we're talking about productivity and profitability is practice managers. The vast majority of practices have practice managers now. And practice managers are a great addition to most practices. But practice managers have to have a high level of financial and economic knowledge, and that's an area that's difficult for almost everybody who works in a practice, whether you're a veterinarian, an owner, or a practice manager. But if you don't have a strong financial sense, you're not going to be able to make decisions that are going to help the practice financially. You may make decisions that help the practice in other ways, but it isn't necessarily going to improve the profitability. And so this is an area that we definitely need to be focusing on. We can't just use the number of staff people as a measure of productivity and say, oh, we have more staff people, we must be more productive. We need to be looking at other metrics, ones that are less commonly used. And those are going to be things like revenue per staff hour or revenue per doctor hour, hours per transaction, and the level of employee retention. So how about business practices in veterinary medicine? In general, most people think that we have not been good at adopting new and innovative business practices in our hospitals. Instead, if we wanted to make more money, we've raised fees. And raising fees is certainly a part of what we should be doing, but it's not a strategy in and of itself. Raising fees or fees pricing in general is a part of an overall cohesive marketing strategy. And we have to look at the value of our services, we have to look at how we provide them, and then we look at how we price them. But we can't just say, here's our services, here's what we're going to charge, and it's going to keep going up. And because we have not adopted better business practices, what we're seeing in our hospitals is poor profitability. We're seeing a lot of people, a lot of clients ignoring compliance and adherence messages. Part of the reason, or a big part of the reason clients are ignoring those messages is because we're not doing a good job of helping clients understand what they need to do to be compliant. We're seeing a declining number of patient visits in spite of the fact that the pet population is growing, and we're seeing a grossly underserved feline population. It's absolutely tragic how few cats are getting the care that they need to. We have many, many opportunities for improvement. We need to improve the efficiency of our delivery system so that we can see more clients and more patients with fewer doctors and fewer staff people. We need to make sure that we are truly identifying client needs. What is it a client wants? Obviously, they want good quality veterinary care, but that definition can vary amongst clients, and it can vary how they want to get it and what they're willing to pay for it. But there need to be practices that can meet a variety of needs. We also need to identify and meet staff needs. The staff are the most important investment that any practice makes. And if we don't have staff people that are happy and fulfilled at what they do, they're not going to be providing good quality care for our patients and good quality client service for our clients. We simply must be able to communicate value better. A certain amount of the reason that clients may be pushing back at price is because they simply don't understand why they need to do something. And if they don't understand it, it means we didn't communicate very well how important a particular procedure or service is for their pet. We need to recognize opportunities. Business changes, the world changes, and we need to keep looking forward and saying, what's on the horizon? What are some of the challenges I'm going to be facing in the future? What are clients going to want in the future? What can I do about that now? We always need to continually recommit to the role of being a patient advocate. If we're doing what's right for our patients, that is going to go a long way to making us economically successful. We needed to open up and learn from successful colleagues. We don't know everything, and if we're veterinarians, we didn't learn a lot of business in veterinary school, though that is certainly changing now. But we need to be open to new ideas, and we need to spend the time and the trouble to get the business and the economic training that we need. And we also need to get over the idea that change is bad. None of us like to change. We don't want to change our exercise habits. We don't want to change what we eat. We don't want to change other of our healthcare habits. We certainly don't want to change our business habits. But if we don't, we're not going to continue to be successful going forward. And when we hit a speed bump, like the recession, it becomes even more clear the changes that we need to make. So overall implications are that veterinary practices aren't really managed very well. Some are. There's a small percentage out there that are doing great, but most are not, and we've been able to thrive and survive in spite of it because economic times were good. But what we were really doing was passing on cost resulting from a lack of efficiency and productivity to clients, and at some point you can't do that anymore. Another area that I find very fearful is this unknown impact of the recession on consumer spending habits. We simply don't know if clients are going to be willing to spend as much money in the future as they did, or what it's going to take to get them to spend that money. I think also for referral practices, we don't know what's going to be the referral habits of general practitioners going forward. So it may be a little shakier in referral medicine than it is for general practitioners. One of the most important things, and I alluded to this earlier, is the concept that everyone who works in a practice has to understand the financial ramifications of the decisions that are within their power to make. So we simply can't make management decisions without looking at what's the dollar cost and what do we think is going to happen from that dollar investment. It doesn't mean that every decision we make is only because of money. We may invest in a piece of equipment because it's going to provide better patient care, and we know that at best we're going to break even, and that's an okay decision, but you need to know that going up front. And if we make some of those decisions, we're going to have to make other decisions that do help us improve financially pretty dramatically. Financial success is not the only kind of success. I mean, there are many ways of judging life success or business success. But when it comes to selling your practice, financial success is the one that matters in the value that your practice has. And so we simply have to understand what's the impact on my practice of each decision that I make. When I buy a new piece of equipment, when I decide to stay open a few more hours, when I decide to shut down on Saturdays, when I decide to hire a new person. As I said before, not every decision has to be made based on money. But if you want a financially successful practice and you're counting on your practice to fund a big part of your retirement, many of your decisions are going to have to be made because they are financially successful for the practice. I don't ever mean to imply that you make a decision that's bad for patient care just because it's financially successful for the practice, but you need to look for the investments and the changes that are good in both ways. If you have as much money as you need for retirement, if you're taking home as much cash as you want, then you don't have to worry about this quite so much. Unfortunately, most practice owners aren't in that position. They need more cash, they want more cash, they have family needs that they want to take care of, they need to invest in their retirement, and in order to do that, we've got to look at the financial ramifications of all of the decisions that we make. Part of the way of achieving that is to make sure that you have a strong business orientation in your practice owners and practice managers, and so that means owners, you need to pay attention to the business side of things. You need to take courses. You need to understand the reports that your accountant and your attorney are giving you. You need to have enough knowledge so that you can hire an intelligent practice manager. You can supervise the people underneath you. It means you need to provide training opportunities for anyone who is in a management role in the practice. You need to provide vision and leadership, part of which is about the importance of being financially successful, because ultimately if you're financially successful, you can provide the best patient care. So all management employees must have strong financial knowledge in order to make good decisions. Now, the level of that financial knowledge can vary depending on the position, but you have to look at the financial impact of any decision that's made.